Picture this. It's Monday morning. You've just walked into the office. The fluorescent lights are buzzing. Your computer is like still waking up, and you're holding a cup of coffee like it's a life preserver.
We've all been there.
Right. And so a coworker walks past your desk, stops for a second, gives you that, knowing look, and casually says, "Hey, how's it going? Crazy week last week, huh?"
The classic Monday trap.
Exactly. And your brain, which is, normally full of brilliant ideas and complex thoughts, it just suddenly freezes. You panic slightly. And what comes out of your mouth is the most robotic textbook sentence imaginable. Something like, "Yes, it was very busy. I had many works to do."
Oh, man. Yeah, it's actually a fascinating biological response.
Wait, biological? I always just thought it was me being awkward.
No, not at all. What you're experiencing in that split second isn't a lack of vocabulary. It's essentially, well, a minor amygdala hijack.
An amygdala hijack. Okay, you're going to have to unpack that for me.
All right, so the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for nuanced, fluent language and, complex social processing, it momentarily shuts down under the sudden spotlight of unstructured social interaction.
Wow. So your brain just sort of goes offline.
Basically, yeah. Your brain defaults to the most basic, rigid neurological pathways it has stored for English. You retrieve this perfectly grammatical sentence from, like, a middle school textbook.
Yeah.
But sociolinguistically, it is entirely inappropriate for the environment.
And it leaves you feeling so incredibly exposed. Because, what you said wasn't technically incorrect, but it completely missed the hidden frequency of the office.
Wow.
You sit there feeling that massive, frustrating gap between the sharp, competent professional you actually are and the clunky, robotic words that just fell out of your mouth.
And that gap, that exact space, is where careers either stagnate or accelerate.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive into the source material today, because we really want to explore the sociolinguistics and the underlying psychology of workplace communication.
Yeah, because the harsh reality of corporate life is that raw intelligence is rarely enough.
It's so true. You might possess the most innovative analytical mind in your entire division, right? You might have a work ethic that completely defies logic. But corporate environments operate on this highly specific, unwritten linguistic code.
They do. And if you lack the nuanced phrasing required to navigate, say, casual hallway interactions or to subtly push back in meetings or even to negotiate boundaries, you become effectively invisible to leadership.
Invisible. And invisible people don't get promoted. So for you listening right now, we are going to map out that unwritten code by walking you through a typical workday. We're starting with the morning gauntlet, the psychology behind those crucial first interactions that, dictate your social standing.
And from there, we're going to unpack the mechanics of the meeting room, which honestly is really just an arena for status theater.
Oh, I love that phrase, status theater. We're also going to analyze the language used to manage the cast of characters around you. Like, how do you construct professional boundaries without sounding insubordinate?
Right. Or how do you mathematically communicate your workload?
Exactly. And crucially, how do you translate stress and burnout into a vocabulary that management actually respects rather than, penalizes you for?
It's a survival guide, basically.
It really is. So if you're prepping for a performance review or maybe trying to outmaneuver a coworker who keeps talking over you, or you simply want to stop sounding like a textbook on your next video call, this deep dive is going to decode the exact phrases you need.
So let's start at the beginning of the day, the first 15 minutes in the office.
Yes. The morning gauntlet. A lot of people treat small talk as just like the necessary evil before you open up the spreadsheets, but research in organizational psychology suggests this is actually where the architectural framework of your office relationships is built.
To understand why the morning greeting is so vital, we have to look at a concept in linguistics called phatic communion.
Phatic communion.
Yeah, phatic expressions are words used not to convey actual information, but to perform a social task.
Okay, so like a verbal handshake.
Precisely. When a textbook tells you to say, "Good morning, how are you doing today?" it treats the greeting as a literal request for data. But in an office hallway at 8:52 a.m., nobody wants data about your morning.
Right. If I actually tell you how my morning is going, that my dog threw up, I spilled coffee on my shoe, and I'm dreading the 10 a.m. budget review, I have broken the social contract.
You have completely violated the parameters of the ritual. The natural alternative is much more streamlined. You just say, "Morning, how's it going?"
It strips away the formal good.
Yes, which immediately lowers the formality and increases the warmth. But the true mastery of phatic communion lies in the response. When someone asks how it's going, the most socially effective response is often a variation of, not bad, not bad, bit tired, but here we are.
Here we are. Oh my gosh, I find myself saying that all the time.
Everybody does.
It feels like this subtle collective surrender to the reality of work. But I'm curious, why is this specific phrase so universally effective? I mean, it doesn't actually mean anything.
Well, it means everything precisely because it doesn't mean anything literal. It is an acknowledgement of shared reality.
Hmm.
Here we are operates as a status leveling mechanism.
Status leveling, how so?
It communicates, I acknowledge that we are both participating in the construct of wage labor at an early hour, and despite the fatigue, we are fulfilling our obligations. It builds instant solidarity without requiring any actual vulnerability.
It's the social WD-40 of the corporate engine.
That is an incredibly apt way to visualize it.
But wait, if we're using this low-energy, slightly cynical phrasing to bond, how does that square with the toxic positivity we often see pushed by management? I hear people say, ready to tackle the week, all the time.
Oh, yes.
If I say, here we are, don't I look like I lack motivation compared to the guy who is tackling things?
That is where you have to read the room,
Yeah.
right? You have to understand the organizational culture. Ready to tackle the week relies on a sports metaphor, specifically a physical, aggressive one.
Like you're a linebacker.
Exactly. You are framing the work week as an opponent that must be subdued. Now, in hyper-competitive environments, sales floors, investment banking, high-growth tech startups, that militaristic active vocabulary signals alignment with management's energy expectations.
So in those places, you'd better be tackling the week.
Yes. However, using that phrase in a more collaborative or creative environment can actually make you sound aggressively naive, or worse, like a middle management cliche. The linguistic trick is knowing which frequency your specific office operates on.
So you have to calibrate the enthusiasm.
Exactly.
But what happens when the morning goes wrong before you even get to the desk? Let's say you're running 20 minutes late. The instinct is to walk in, head down, and mutter, the traffic was bad, but that feels so insufficient.
It is insufficient because it's merely a statement of fact.
Mm-hmm.
In casual conversational English, particularly in stressful scenarios, facts do not bond people.
Okay, so what bonds people?
Hyperbole. Yeah. When you walk in late, the socially calibrated move is to elevate the language. You say, traffic was absolutely brutal today.
I do this constantly. But if I take a step back, isn't using a word like brutal, which literally implies savage violence and cruelty, a bit unhinged for a traffic jam on a Tuesday?
It sounds unhinged if you take it literally, sure.
Right. I mean, if we use these massive dramatic phrases for mundane inconveniences, doesn't it completely dilute the meaning of the word for when a legitimate crisis happens?
This touches on a fundamental misunderstanding of how hyperbole functions in English. When you call the traffic brutal, your colleagues know you aren't comparing a highway interchange to a medieval battlefield.
I hope not.
Right, you are not conveying objective truth. You are issuing an invitation for validation.
An invitation for validation.
Yes, hyperbole is a social ritual where you dramatically inflate a shared nuisance to signal that you suffered.
Yeah.
And you are asking your listener to validate that suffering so you can both quickly move past it.
It's like a psychological pressure valve.
Exactly. If you just say traffic was bad, there is no emotional hook for the other person to grab onto. If you say it was brutal, they can sigh, shake their head, and say, oh, I know, the intersection on 5th is a nightmare.
You've turned a personal failure being late into a shared bonding exercise over a common enemy.
Precisely. You're building a bridge.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It's an invitation to commiserate. But what about the inverse? What if the universe aligns and I actually arrive at the office 20 minutes early? I can't walk in and say, I am incredibly punctual and efficient today.
Oh, absolutely not.
People would hate me.
They really would. In egalitarian business cultures, particularly in the US, the UK, and Australia, overt boasting about basic competence is highly penalized socially. It triggers instant resentment.
So what's the workaround?
The sociolinguistic workaround is self-deprecating humor. You say something like, I actually made it in early today. I don't know what happened.
Huh. As if your own competence is a baffling mystery to you.
Exactly. You are framing your success as a magical accident. Claiming you don't know what happened charms the listener because it lowers your status just enough to remove any threat your early arrival might pose to their ego.
Wow.
It softens the sharp edges of your competence. You are highly capable, but you are framing it as luck, which makes you approachable.
It's a total verbal sleight of hand.
It really is.
And once you finally make it to your desk, whether you battled brutal traffic or magically arrived early, you have to transition into the actual work, but you can't just sit down in
No, you
silence.
have to narrate the transition.
Right. Phrases like, let me just get settled and I'll be right with you, or I need to grab a coffee before I can function.
Before I can function is another brilliant use of dramatic flair.
Is it hyperbole again?
Yes. You are jokingly implying that without caffeine, your biological systems are entirely offline. It's a relatable, humanizing way to establish a temporary boundary. You're buying yourself 2 minutes of peace without sounding dismissive.
And then, once the coffee is acquired, the armor goes on. You look at your coworker and say, I've got a packed schedule today, back-to-back calls all morning.
Let's analyze the spatial metaphors in that
That
sentence.
packed and back-to-back.
Right. You're describing time as a physical container that has been filled to its absolute limit, leaving no empty space. The calls are physically touching one another.
Back-to-back.
Yes. It creates a vivid psychological image of unavailability. You are establishing your workload instantly, setting expectations that you cannot be interrupted, but doing it in a way that highlights your importance to the organization.
It really is a performance.
It's pure theater.
And speaking of performance, once that morning gauntlet is over, we march straight into the ultimate arena. The place where time goes to die, but also where promotions are quietly decided. The meeting room.
The meeting room requires an entirely different linguistic toolkit because the stakes are exponentially higher.
Oh, for sure. A hallway conversation is usually peer-to-peer. But a meeting, it's a multi-directional performance. Everything you say is being evaluated simultaneously by your peers, your direct reports, and leadership.
Exactly.
Let's start with just knowing what is going on. We've all been in that situation where we walk into a room and realize we have absolutely no idea what the meeting is about.
A nightmare scenario.
My instinct is to whisper to the person next to me, what are we doing? But that obviously projects total incompetence.
It does. The key is to shift the blame from your lack of preparation to the sheer volume of your responsibilities.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Instead of saying, I don't know, you use the phrasing, I didn't get a chance to look at the agenda.
That is so slick. I didn't get a chance. It implies I was far too busy executing high-level tasks to review this document. It frames ignorance as a byproduct of being in high demand.
It preserves your status beautifully. But the true danger in a meeting isn't the agenda. It's the mechanics of turn-taking.
Yes. How do you interject in a heated discussion without looking arrogant, aggressive, or out of touch?
This is where a lot of non-native speakers, and honestly native speakers too, really freeze.
I freeze all the time. If two senior people are going back and forth, jumping in feels like stepping onto a busy highway.
It does.
The phrase that gets thrown around is, can I just jump in here for a second? I want to pause on the imagery of jumping in because it treats the conversation like a moving physical object, like a stream of water.
Sociolinguists refer to this as a spatial metaphor for communication. In English, we conceptualize a conversation as a physical space. We hold the floor, we step on someone's toes, we talk over people.
Right?
If a conversation is a flowing river, you cannot simply throw a boulder into it. That is an interruption, and it creates a splash that annoys everyone. Jumping in acknowledges the momentum of the current. It asks for permission to enter the stream while simultaneously entering it.
It's the illusion of asking permission. By the time you finish saying, could I just jump in, you are already in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It satisfies the cultural requirement for politeness. Specifically, negative face in politeness theory, which is the desire not to be imposed upon while executing an assertive maneuver.
Okay, so you've successfully jumped into the river without making a splash. Now you have the floor. You have the attention of the room. What do you do with it?
Well, if you agree with the current direction, you use a phrase like, building on that, I think we should consider.
Building on that. Another structural metaphor.
Exactly. You are treating the previous speaker's idea as the architectural base and your idea as the next floor of the skyscraper.
It reminds me of the fundamental rule of improv comedy, which is yes and.
So that's a great comparison.
Yeah, if we're doing a scene and you say, look, a giant spaceship, and I say, no, that's just a toaster, the scene dies instantly. I've killed the momentum. I have to say yes, and the aliens are waving at us. Building on that is the corporate equivalent of yes and. You validate the ego of the person who spoke before you, which neurologically makes them more receptive to you, and then you attach your own brilliant idea to their foundation.
It is masterful social maneuvering. It frames your individual contribution as a collective triumph.
But the real test of fluency isn't agreeing. It is navigating disagreement.
Now, this is the pressure test.
How do you tell someone their idea is fundamentally flawed without making an enemy? Because you can't just say, that won't work, or I disagree.
Definitely not.
Even if you are 100% factually correct, saying you're wrong in a corporate setting is basically declaring war.
Because it attacks their competence directly. The psychological concept here is cognitive dissonance. When people are told they are wrong, their brain registers it as a threat, and they double down on their original position regardless of facts.
So how do we bypass the defense mechanism?
You use the art of the pushback. The exact phrase is, let me push back on that a little. I think there might be another way to look at it.
Pushback. Again, physical imagery. But it's a gentle, negotiated push.
Let us dissect the linguistics of this sentence because it is a masterclass in mitigation.
Mitigation meaning softening the blow.
Yes, mitigation is the strategy of softening the blow of an aggressive act. Let me frame the disagreement as a polite request. Pushback objectifies the disagreement. You are pushing against the idea, not the person.
Oh, that's subtle.
A little. Drastically minimizes the severity of your opposition. There might be introduces possibility rather than absolute objective certainty. And finally, another way to look at it suggests that their way isn't necessarily wrong, it's just one of multiple perspectives.
It is almost hypnotic. You're entirely dismantling their argument, but you wrap it in so much linguistic bubble wrap that they can't even feel the punch.
You preserve their dignity while advancing your own agenda. This is the hallmark of executive presence.
But let me ask you this. Doesn't this intense reliance on softened, mitigated language slow everything down? I mean, if an idea is bad, and we have to spend 3 sentences wrapping our critique in bubble wrap, aren't we just sacrificing efficiency for the sake of fragile egos?
That is the classic tension between efficiency and effectiveness. You are correct that direct communication is faster in the moment.
Right. Just say no.
However, organizational psychology shows that blunt disagreement creates interpersonal friction. That friction destroys trust. And when trust is destroyed, the long-term execution of any project grinds to a halt.
Wow, okay.
You spend a few extra syllables to mitigate the disagreement today, so you don't spend 3 weeks dealing with a passive-aggressive colleague who is quietly sabotaging your project because they felt publicly humiliated.
So it's an investment in social capital.
It is exactly that.
That is a phenomenal point. Efficiency in speech does not equal effectiveness in outcome.
Ab-
But speaking of things that can derail a meeting, there is a massive linguistic trap that can cause absolute chaos if you are working on an international team. And we have to talk about it. The phrase is, can we table that for now?
Oh boy. This is perhaps one of the most dangerous idioms in global business English due to the transatlantic divide.
I always thought tabling something meant putting it aside, like
Yeah.
literally putting the folder down on the table and walking away.
If you are in a meeting in the United States or Canada, you are entirely correct. The American conceptualization of tabling an item means to postpone it, to remove it from the active agenda.
Right.
But this stems from a divergence in parliamentary procedure. In the British Parliament, to table a motion means to physically lay it upon the clerk's table so that it can be debated immediately.
So it means the exact opposite.
Precisely. In British, Australian, and often South African business English, let's table that means let us bring this topic forward right now for urgent discussion.
Imagine the absolute horror in a Zoom room with an American project manager and a British engineering team.
It happens more often than you'd think.
The American looks at the clock, sees they're running late, and says, we're short on time, let's table the budget issue. They think they just saved the meeting. Meanwhile, the British engineers immediately open all their spreadsheets, crack their knuckles, and prepare to dive into a 45-minute argument about overhead costs.
It highlights why fluency is not merely about vocabulary. It is about shared cultural context. If you use the wrong cultural frequency, your intended message is completely inverted.
That is terrifying. So how do you safely manage the flow of a meeting if things are actually spiraling? Like when everyone is arguing over a minor detail and you can feel the hour just slipping away.
You step into the void with leadership language, you don't scold, and you don't pull rank. You diagnose a collective issue.
So what do you say?
You say, I think we're getting a bit off track. Can we refocus?
We're getting a bit off track. The use of we there is brilliant. You aren't saying you two are wasting our time. You are including yourself in the failure.
Exactly. It removes the sting of the correction. But proposing a collective solution Can we refocus? You are subtly positioning yourself as the facilitator of the room,
Even if you aren't the boss.
even if you aren't the boss. When you do this in a room full of people arguing over font sizes or minor budget line items, you instantly project the image of the only adult in the room. You elevate yourself above the minutia.
And as the meeting mercifully comes to a close, you have to lock in the outcome. Can you send me the meeting notes? Or I'll follow up with an email to recap what we agreed on.
Creating a paper trail is paramount. Human memory is highly fallible, and in a corporate setting, differing memories of a verbal agreement lead to conflict. Recapping by email establishes the official historical record of the meeting.
Which brings us to the unspoken truth that hangs over almost every conference room in the corporate world. The sentence everyone is thinking, but rarely says out loud. That could have been an email.
The universal lament.
Truly. We all know the pain of sitting through an hour-long presentation that was literally just someone reading bullet points off a slide. If everyone hates these meetings and everyone knows they are inefficient, why do we keep having them?
It is a profound question about the anthropology of the workplace. We complain that meetings are inefficient because we mistakenly believe their primary purpose is the transfer of information.
Isn't it?
No. An email is vastly superior for transferring data. But a meeting, sociologically speaking, serves entirely different functions. It is a ritual of hierarchy. It forces alignment through physical or visual presence.
Wait, unpack that. A ritual of hierarchy.
Yes. For many managers, calling a meeting is the most tangible manifestation of their authority. The ability to command the time and attention of 10 people for an hour is a demonstration of power.
That makes so much sense.
Furthermore, meetings are a venue for visibility. In knowledge work, where the actual labor happens invisibly inside a computer, a meeting is the stage where people go to be seen working. They exist to perform competence in front of leadership.
So the inefficiency isn't a bug.
It is a feature.
Mm.
It is a demonstration of collective commitment to the organization, demanding a sacrifice of your time.
Wow. So when I sit there frustrated, thinking this is a waste of time, I'm completely missing the point. The point is the frustrated, thinking this is a waste of time, I'm completely missing the point. The point is the performance. The meeting is just a corporate theater production, and my attendance is mandatory to validate the manager's role as the director.
That is an incredibly accurate way to frame it,
That is both fascinating and deeply exhausting.
which perfectly explains why surviving that theater requires such precise linguistic tools.
Exactly. All right, so you have survived the morning gauntlet. You have navigated the corporate theater of the meeting room. You didn't accidentally table anything the wrong way.
Hopefully.
Now you have to return to your desk and actually execute the work that was just assigned to you. This requires interacting with the cast of characters in your office and managing the perception of your workload.
And the way you narrate your workload to your peers and managers is a highly delicate balancing act. Office environments demand that you project one of two states, and you must oscillate between them strategically.
Okay, what are the two states?
You must either be drowning in vital work, which validates your importance to the company, or you must project total, effortless control, which validates your competence.
The vocabulary of drowning is so visceral. I'm completely swamped right now. I'm buried in deadlines. This week is absolutely relentless. Heavy lift. We are using the language of physical survival for digital tasks.
We really are.
I mean, you are sitting in an ergonomic, mesh-backed chair in a climate-controlled room, typing on a keyboard, but you are describing your day as if you're wading through a literal swamp or being buried alive under an avalanche.
This is a prime example of embodied cognition in linguistics.
Embodied cognition.
Yes, our brains evolved to navigate a physical, three-dimensional world. We do not have native neural pathways for abstract concepts like competing digital priorities or asynchronous communication overload. So, the brain borrows the pathways it uses for physical weight and spatial constraint. When your cognitive load exceeds your working memory, when you have 400 unread emails and 3 overdue projects, your nervous system literally interprets that stress as physical weight. You feel heavy. You feel buried.
That is wild.
The language reflects the internal biological reality of the stress response, even though the external environment is perfectly safe.
That makes total sense. We are using our caveman brains to process a modern inbox, and practically speaking, deploying this dramatic language is a defense mechanism, isn't it? If I tell my coworker I'm swamped, I am putting up a shield.
Correct. It signals that your operational bandwidth is completely maxed out. It preemptively deters them from asking you for a favor or assigning you another task. It establishes a perimeter.
But you can't live in the swamp forever, right? If you
Okay.
are always buried, eventually leadership thinks this person can't handle their job. You have to pivot to projecting total control. I'm on top of it. I knocked out the easy stuff this morning. I love the phrase knocked out. Like you walked into the office and physically punched your to-do list until it surrendered.
It projects active, aggressive competence.
Hmm.
But the most psychologically complex phrase in this entire section, the phrase that truly separates mid-level employees from future executives, is remarkably simple. 4 words.
Give it to me.
I'll figure it out.
I figure it out. Like, I honestly have no idea how I am going to migrate this database by Friday, but I'll figure it out. Why is that the golden ticket?
Because it synthesizes vulnerability with supreme confidence. Let's look at the mechanics of this phrase. When a manager hands you a complex, ambiguous problem, their primary fear is that the problem will bounce right back to them.
Right.
When you say, I don't want to do this, you are handing the mental burden back to the manager.
You're making it their problem again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you say, I'll figure it out, you are absorbing the ambiguity. You are signaling a growth mindset. You are telling leadership, my capacity to solve unknown problems is greater than the complexity of this specific task.
Wow.
You are relieving the manager of their cognitive burden. You're promising self-reliance. To a stressed manager, an employee who says, I'll figure it out, is the most valuable asset on the team.
Let me challenge that, though. I have used I'll figure it out, and while it sounds great in the moment, I often walk back to my desk and experience crippling imposter syndrome.
Of course.
I realize I have just volunteered for a task I have zero training for. Isn't this phrase just a recipe for massive anxiety and unpaid overtime? Aren't we just setting ourselves up to fail?
That is the inherent risk of the phrase. You are taking a calculated gamble on your own resourcefulness. If you use it, you must be prepared to leverage your network, use search engines aggressively, and put in the invisible labor required to actually figure it out.
So it's not a magic spell.
It is not a magic spell. It is a commitment to a steep learning curve. If you say it and then fail to deliver, your credibility is severely damaged. But the reward for pulling it off is rapid career acceleration.
High risk, high reward, and a lot of whether you succeed or fail depends on who you are reporting to. We have to talk about navigating the boss. Diplomacy in action.
Discussing leadership requires extreme linguistic precision because your words can easily be weaponized against you.
So true.
When you have a good manager, the language is easy. She really goes to bat for her team.
I love the baseball analogy. She steps up to the plate and takes the swing so we don't have to. Or he trusts us without micromanaging.
But the true test of your professional vocabulary is how you describe a bad manager. You will inevitably experience frustration with leadership. How you articulate that frustration dictates your own professional reputation.
Okay, let's play this out. Let's look at a manager who constantly changes expectations.
The correct phrasing is, my manager tends to move the goalposts at the last minute.
I have used this, but if I'm honest, doesn't saying they move the goalposts sound a bit confrontational? If I say that in a 360 review or to a peer, aren't I directly accusing my boss of being unfair, manipulative, and setting me up to fail?
You are accusing them of that, yes. But you are doing it through the protective layer of a structural metaphor.
A structural metaphor.
Right. If you say, my boss is erratic and treats me unfairly, you sound emotional. You sound like a complainer. HR will likely view you as the problem.
Good point.
But if you say, they tend to move the goalposts, you have stripped the emotion out of it. You're describing a flaw in the operational workflow. You are using the rules of a game to point out a logical inconsistency in management style.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It removes the personal insult and replaces it with a process critique. It is a highly sanitized, safe way to communicate profound dissatisfaction.
It's like putting a tailored suit and tie on your complaining.
It is exactly that. You apply the same logic when a boss is erratic. You don't say he is unpredictable. You say he is difficult to read. You don't say she has no idea what she wants. You say she struggles to communicate clear priorities. You are critiquing the outward behavior, the process, never the internal character.
And we absolutely have to apply that same sterile diplomatic language to our coworkers, because the office is an ecosystem filled with a wild cast of characters.
It certainly is.
You have the amazing ones, the people with institutional knowledge, the ones who have been there for 15 years and know how to fix the printer and where all the metaphorical bodies are buried. The absolute legend who brings donuts.
The best kind of coworker.
But managing the difficult coworkers is where people usually snap.
And snapping is what you must avoid. Complaining professionally about a peer is an art form that requires clinical precision. The golden rule is use specific, measured, non-personal language.
Give me an example. Let's say there is a guy who just constantly talks over women in meetings. It is infuriating. My instinct is to say, he is an arrogant, sexist jerk.
Which may be entirely true. But in the corporate arena, using moral or emotional judgments weakens your case. It becomes a matter of interpersonal conflict rather than a business issue.
So what's the corporate way to say it?
Instead, you describe the mechanical action objectively. He has a tendency to talk over people in meetings, which prevents us from hearing all perspectives.
It's so clinical. It drains all the heat out of the anger.
It needs to be clinical to be actionable. But the absolute zenith of this kind of corporate critique is how you describe someone who is a rogue operator.
A rogue operator, like someone who ignores the rules, skips approvals, and just does whatever they want.
Exactly. The phrase is, she tends to go around the proper channels.
Oh, that is devastating. It sounds so mild and polite on the surface. But in the corporate world, that is a total character assassination.
It really is.
You are effectively calling them a rogue operative who respects no authority, but you are saying it in a frequency that HR will enthusiastically write down on their clipboard.
It is devastating because it attacks their adherence to structure. The corporate world operates on process. If you complain that a coworker is mean or annoying, management sees that as a personality clash. They will tell you to work it out.
Right.
But if you state that a coworker goes around proper channels, you are highlighting a structural risk to the business. You are signaling that they are a liability. You are weaponizing corporate vocabulary to protect your own workflow.
Okay, so we are navigating these moving goalposts. We are dodging rogue coworkers going around proper channels. We are carrying the physical weight of being swamped, and we are performing in meetings.
A lot.
The cumulative effect of all this maneuvering is exhausting. Eventually, the facade cracks. This brings us to what I think is the most vital skill in the modern workplace. Communicating stress before it completely breaks you. We are in the pressure cooker.
The pressure cooker is where your linguistic choices carry the absolute most weight. When stress leads to a failure, the stakes are your professional reputation.
Let's examine the vocabulary of mistakes. When something goes wrong, the phrases often used are, we hit a snag, or I dropped the ball.
Yes.
Hit a snag. A snag is what happens to a wool sweater when it catches on a nail. It is so minor. But in corporate speak, we hit a snag could mean the entire European server farm just crashed, and we are losing millions of dollars. Why do we minimize it so drastically?
To prevent panic contagion, the brain reacts to the tone and magnitude of language. By calling a massive failure a snag, you are intentionally downplaying the emotional severity to keep the team's cognitive functions focused on problem solving rather than fear.
Okay, that makes sense.
However, the more critical element here is how you take responsibility. Western professional culture, particularly in North America, the UK, and Australia, places a massive premium on visible accountability.
This goes against every human instinct. Our fight-or-flight response when a mistake happens is to deflect. We want to say, the marketing team didn't send the files on time, or the software glitched. Deflection feels like survival.
Deflection is a biological instinct, yes. But professionally, it is fatal. In many cultures, admitting a mistake is a loss of face. But in Western corporate dynamics, avoiding blame when you are clearly at fault is perceived as profound weakness and a lack of leadership capability.
So what's the phrase?
The phrase you must master is, that was my fault. I should have double-checked before sending it. Followed immediately by, I apologize for the confusion. Let me make it right.
It is the apology tour, but why does the boss actually like hearing you say you messed up?
Because it demonstrates locus of control.
Locus of control.
Yes. When you blame the marketing team or the software, you are telling your manager that you are a victim of your environment. You have no control over the outcomes.
Right.
But when you take the blame, you are paradoxically taking the power. You are saying, I am responsible enough to own this failure, and therefore I possess the agency to fix it. Saying, let me make it right, instantly transforms you from a liability into an active problem solver. You control the narrative of the recovery.
I love that framing. You are taking the power back. And you don't necessarily have to make it right all by yourself. You can ask for help, but you have to do it without looking incompetent.
Exactly.
The phrase I hear constantly is, can I pick your brain on this?
Pick your brain is a fascinating, almost grotesque idiom if you think about it literally.
It sounds like a zombie movie. Excuse me, I have hit a snag and I would like to consume the contents of your skull.
Visually, yes,
Oh?
but functionally, it is an incredibly elegant compliance strategy. It is a compliment cleverly disguised as a request for labor.
A compliment.
Yes. By asking to pick their brain, you are implying that their intellect is a valuable high-status resource worth extracting. People are fundamentally driven by ego, and they love to have their brains picked because it flatters their expertise. You are much more likely to get help if you stroke their ego than if you just say, I don't understand how to do this, help me.
It is so disarming. Similarly, asking for a second pair of eyes on a document. You aren't asking them to fix your terrible writing, you are just asking for an objective visual pass. It removes the pressure.
Precisely.
But what happens when picking brains and getting a second pair of eyes isn't enough? What happens when the pressure cooker is just boiling over and you are fundamentally exhausted? We have to talk about setting boundaries.
The vocabulary of self-preservation has undergone a radical evolution over the past 10 to 15 years. We now openly use phrases like putting in long hours, feeling burned out, and explicitly stating the need to set some boundaries.
Which is huge.
2 decades ago, using the word boundaries in an office setting would have been viewed as insubordinate or indicative of a lack of commitment.
I want to try an analogy here because boundaries can feel like a very abstract clinical therapy word that doesn't mean much in reality.
Go for it.
Think about workplace boundaries, like property lines around a house. If you buy a house and you don't put up a physical fence or a line of bushes, what happens? Eventually, the neighborhood kids start cutting across your lawn to get to the park.
Right.
Your neighbor starts parking his truck with 2 wheels on your grass. They aren't doing it to be malicious. They are doing it because it is convenient for them, and you haven't explicitly defined where your space begins.
That is an excellent spatial representation of psychological limits.
Right. So setting a boundary at work, saying, I will be offline after 6 p.m. or I cannot take on another project this quarter, doesn't make the work disappear. It doesn't stop the emails from hitting the server. But it puts up a fence. It clearly defines where your personal life begins, preventing the office from slowly, conveniently building a permanent extension on your front lawn.
A very clear fence.
But let me push back on my own analogy. Does this actually work? Because in a lot of companies, if you put up that fence, management just fires you and hires someone who will let them park the truck on the lawn.
You are identifying the tension between the ideal progressive workplace and the reality of hypercapitalism. It is true that in some toxic environments, setting a boundary is a career-limiting move.
Yeah, that's the fear.
However, the broader macro trend in modern knowledge work is shifting. The cost of replacing burned-out employees is astronomically high. Consequently, healthy organizations are beginning to respect these property lines because it is good for the bottom line.
That's true.
The fact that the phrase mental health day is now largely acceptable is staggering. It is a linguistic acknowledgement that cognitive and emotional exhaustion are legitimate medical reasons for absence, on par with a physical fever.
That shift from Industrial Revolution time tracking, where you were just a body on an assembly line, to recognizing the human limits of the knowledge worker is massive.
And because we are beginning to recognize our own human limits, we're also developing the language to recognize when the humans around us are failing. This leads us to the most vital interpersonal skill, supporting others.
Yeah.
The phrasing is simple. Hey, you've seemed a bit off lately. Is everything okay? I'm here if you need anything.
Seemed a bit off. It is incredibly gentle. You aren't barging in saying, your performance is terrible, are you depressed? You are noticing them as a complete person, not just a productivity unit.
In a corporate environment built entirely on the performance of competence, on tackling the week and crushing goals, offering someone a safe, non-judgmental space to drop the mask is an act of profound empathy.
It really is.
It temporarily suspends the artificial construct of the office. A simple, is everything okay, can alter the trajectory of someone's week, because the feeling of being truly seen when you are struggling is a powerful psychological reset.
It breaks the script. And if you can master that kind of empathy, if you can successfully negotiate your boundaries, manage the moving goalposts, and survive the pressure cooker without burning out, a shift happens.
The shift from defense to offense.
Exactly. You transition from merely surviving your job to actively growing within it. Which brings us to our final segment, career growth and the end of the day.
Transitioning to growth requires a pivot in your vocabulary.
Yeah.
You are no longer narrating the day-to-day survival. You are projecting ambition into the future. But ambition must be packaged carefully.
Right.
You want to ask for a promotion or a raise without sounding entitled, demanding, or like you were issuing an ultimatum.
The phrases for this are basically corporate cheat codes. Instead of walking in and saying, I want a promotion, you say, I'm looking to grow in this role.
Perfect.
Instead of saying, make me a manager, you say, I'd love to get more exposure to the strategic side of things. It is so incredibly polished.
It is polished because it relies on alignment, but the absolute pinnacle phrase in the vocabulary of career advancement is this: I want to make sure I'm contributing at the highest level possible.
Let's really break that down. Why is that the ultimate sentence to drop in a performance review?
To understand its power, you
Yeah.
have to understand the psychology of the manager sitting across from you. A manager is constantly, subconsciously evaluating the return on investment of every employee. When you walk in and say, I want more money, or I want a better title, the linguistic focus is entirely on extraction. You are stating what you want to take from the company. This instantly triggers a defensive mathematical calculation in the manager's brain.
So you start looking for reasons why you don't deserve it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you reframe it and say, I want to make sure I'm contributing at the highest level possible, you completely invert the dynamic. You shift the focus entirely onto the value you are offering to them.
Oh, that's smart.
You are essentially asking them to help you give them more value. It is psychologically irresistible to leadership. You are framing your personal ambition as an organizational benefit.
You are basically saying, let me make you look incredibly good to your boss. And no manager in the history of the world has ever turned down the opportunity to look better.
Never. It is a sentence that echoes in a manager's head long after the review is over, because it aligns your upward mobility with their success.
And then, after you've executed that flawless career conversation, after you've managed the meetings, navigated the swamped workload, mitigated the conflict, and held your boundaries, the clock finally hits 5:00 p.m.
Or 6:00 p.m.
Whenever you finally log off, we need to talk about the daily wrap-up vocabulary.
The wrap-up is the necessary psychological bookend to the morning gauntlet. Just as you used phatic communion to enter the social space of work, you must use specific linguistic rituals to execute a clean break and exit that space.
All right, I'm going to call it a day. That has to be one of the greatest, most satisfying phrases in the English language.
It is highly effective. Calling it is definitive. You are declaring an end to the active state of labor. Another excellent strategy for deferring late arriving work is, I'll pick this up first thing tomorrow. I need fresh eyes in the morning.
Fresh eyes. I use that when I've been staring at a spreadsheet for so long that the numbers start to look like ancient hieroglyphics.
Fresh eyes in the morning relies on the biological truth that sleep resets our cognitive framing and restores working memory. But linguistically, it is a brilliant defense.
Why is it a defense?
It is a highly professional way of saying, I am currently too mentally fatigued to do this at a high standard, and stopping work right now is actually better for the quality of the company's product. You are justifying your rest as a business imperative.
And then finally, we reach the ultimate triumph. The Friday sign-off. Happy Friday, everyone. We made it. I want to pause on we made it. The collective relief encoded in those 3 words is staggering.
It is a collective exhalation.
Yes. By saying we made it, you are acknowledging that working a modern office job, dealing with the endless emails, the performative meetings, the moving goalposts, the rogue coworkers, the brutal commute, it is fundamentally a shared trauma bonding experience.
Truly.
You are dropping the professional mask just enough to look around and say, we survived another cycle.
It is a momentary lapse into total honesty before the weekend begins.
It is the perfect closure. So let's pull all of this together and recap the core message of this deep dive. We have covered an immense amount of sociolinguistic ground today.
We really have.
From the phatic communion of morning, how's it going, to the cultural minefield of let's table that, to the growth mindset of I'll figure it out, all the way to the collective survival of we made it. And what becomes crystal clear when you look at the psychology behind these words is that this isn't just about memorizing vocabulary for a test.
No, absolutely not. These phrases are functional mechanical tools.
Exactly. They are the literal tools you use to construct relationships, to project supreme competence when internally you are terrified, to politely dismantle someone's terrible idea without bruising their ego, and to build defenses that protect your sanity when the pressure cooker gets too hot.
And that brings us to a profound psychological provocation about fluency itself. Fluency is often misunderstood simply as knowing a lot of words. But in reality, fluency isn't something that happens to you over time. It is a choice. Your command of the language improves at the exact moment you decide to be brave enough to wield it.
Brave enough to wield it.
I want to leave you, the listener, with this thought to ponder. We often think of bravery in the context of non-native speakers finding the courage to speak up in a second language. But let us apply this to everyone, including native speakers. If workplace fluency requires bravery, how often do we intentionally hide behind silence or clunky robotic language simply because we are too afraid of the social consequences?
Oh, wow. That cuts deep.
Consider your own behavior. How often do you sit silently in a meeting watching a terrible decision being made, rather than having the courage to say, let me push back on that a little because you fear the friction of conflict?
A lot of us do that.
How often do you automatically say, yes, I'll take care of it, when your inbox is already overflowing, rather than bravely stating, I am completely swamped, because you are terrified of looking weak or incapable?
Mm.
How often do you let a manager trample all over your evening, rather than having the nerve to say, I need to set some boundaries?
We do it constantly. We choose the robotic, compliant response because the fluent, honest response requires a vulnerability we aren't willing to risk.
Exactly. True fluency in the workplace, it turns out, is not just an exercise in vocabulary or grammar. It's a measure of courage. You have to be brave enough to assert your presence, defend your limits, and claim your space in the room.
So let's go back to where we started. Next Monday morning. You walk into the office. The fluorescent lights are buzzing. The coffee is in your hand. Your coworker walks by and says, crazy week last week, huh? Do not freeze. Do not be the robot. Take a breath. Find that courage. Look them in the eye and say, bit tired, but here we are. Let's get settled.
Yeah.
Because you are not invisible. You know the code now. And it is time they heard you.